All right, Brittany, thanks so much for being on this podcast. I appreciate it. My first question that I have for you is, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the work that you do today.
Okay, great. First, thank you so much again for having me on. I really appreciate it. And so, my name is Brittney Munoz, and I am a 500-hour certified yoga instructor. I specialize or I focus on teaching trauma-informed yoga. And I completed my 200 and 300-hour teacher trainings at a place called Cambio Yoga in Colorado Springs. It's a donation-based studio. And then more recently, I completed a 20-hour trauma focused training with Comeback Yoga, which is a nonprofit based out here in Colorado that brings free yoga to veterans. And um, yeah, but my journey began with yoga about 10 years ago. I started practicing and really found that it was the first place that I was able to find safety in my body and was able to kind of discharge and let go some of those old patterns and anger and things I had been holding on to. And then about 3.5 years ago, we moved out here and I decided to become a teacher. And that's when I really found a lot of transformation and was able to start to build a strong foundation with yoga to be able to look at my own trauma. So I have a lot of kind of chronic stress and trauma and things that I was holding on to. And yoga became a really powerful tool to really explore all that. And yeah, so and then I knew once I started teaching from a trauma-informed perspective that I really wanted to help other women that were going through these things.
hmm Yeah, because when I heard you say yoga for the first time, I get so giddy because I love yoga and it's really fascinating, all the exercises and stuff. Because I remember I took a yoga class. It was an outdoor class over the summer, and it was just great to really connect with people who not only knew yoga but were new to the whole thing the first time.
Yeah, yeah. And oh, I love teaching outdoors. It's so nice. In the summers, I teach yoga in the park here, and it's my favorite space to teach yoga in because you can really tap into all the natural elements too. But yeah, I teach mostly gentle yoga, so it's kind of a beginner focused yoga and it's makes it more accessible for everybody. I also really love teaching kids yoga. It's something I'm passionate about. So, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about trauma-informed yoga. What's that all about? Because I would imagine it's very different and complex.
Well, we kind of so the studio that I learned at and have been mentored at has a lot of trauma informed approaches in their teaching, but it's just kind of really honing even more in on invitation and choice, making sure, and then you're very conscious of your verbiage when you're speaking. So not using triggering words, not adjusting. So when I'm teaching from a trauma-informed approach with clients, I'm never putting my hands on them unless it's something we discussed beforehand, if they want an adjustment or something like that. So it's a lot of invitation and choice and just being very conscious of the fact that most people have gone through trauma, some sort of trauma, and really taking that into consideration and personalizing, individualizing each person's practice. If you're teaching from a one-on-one perspective, and finding those things out. So I really like to build a relationship with my clients and build that connection and that trust. And if they're able to talk a little bit about their trauma, then it helps me to know, like, okay, we might just completely avoid certain poses. So
So where did you learn that trauma-informed yoga? Did you learn it from like a class, or did you like learn it from a mentor that you worked closely with?
I had heard about it, so I've been researching and kind of going on a deep dive of my own trauma the last 5 years and have been in trauma therapy and have started just reading a lot on like the polyvagal theory and yoga
Hmm.
and all these things and found trauma-informed yoga and started getting really passionate about it. There are some teachers that teach from more specifically from that perspective at the studio I teach at. But I just knew I wanted to kind of dive deeper into it. And so then I took a training recently with comeback yoga. And yeah, I just want to keep building on that for the sake of my clients.
And so in trauma-informed yoga, what are the modalities involved?
The modalities. So it's a lot of, again, speaking from invitation and choice. I mean, with all yoga or with most yoga classes, we use a lot of props. Um, so making it as accessible as it can be using, bolsters and blankets and blocks and stuff like that. As far as like specific modalities you can use, or again, just speaking from a certain type of language and building trust and safety. I would say safety is the biggest thing. Making sure that your clients and students feel safe in the
Hmm.
space. So, for example, when I'm teaching a public class, I might cue at the beginning of class that the door to the studio is locked, but that I am keeping my eye on the door. We have windows in the room that I teach in, so I might cue that I'm keeping my eye on the door and that nobody should be entering this space. But if they do enter this space, it would be another teacher, and I'll be looking and watching. And so just to let them know that I am keeping my eye on the door, that I'm watching the space. That way they have the ability, they feel comfort and support with just kind of letting their nervous system relax. And so they're not
Hmm.
staying hyper aware and looking around the room or, having to worry about those things because I'm making sure this space is safe for them.
Hmm. And so, what sorts of things, like, what have you learned in like doing this kind of work as a trauma-informed yoga instructor? Is there anything that you sort of take away that you're like, I really kind of understand what this is like, or understand what my clients are, because you teach a lot of trauma-informed yoga to your clients, but like, what have you learned based on your sort of experience working with your clients, I guess?
Adaptability. So I don't really go into my sessions with a plan anymore, a specific plan of what I'm going to teach. I've learned that I've had to be very adaptable because we might start something that day and then my client might be like, "Hey, I'm not feeling this today. I'm feeling really emotional." A lot of times, if you're doing a lot of heart opening poses or hip opening poses, that kind of releases that stored emotion. So, say I had planned a practice where we're doing a lot of that, and then they're already having a dysregulated day and they're starting to feel more dysregulated. So, then we'll flip it and just work on breath work, maybe a more restorative practice. So, kind of holding some really calming poses. And I might just end with a guided meditation if I hadn't planned that. So, just being very adaptable to their needs in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's cool. And is there anything that you'd like to learn in terms of something new as a trauma-informed yoga instructor, or that you're curious about, that you're like, I'm really curious or want to dive in deeper more on this area?
Oh gosh, everything. I feel like
Yeah.
I have so much I want to learn, and I want to keep taking more trauma trainings. I right now am really into learning more about the polyvagal theory and the kind of window of tolerance and teaching from that and within that and how we can just kind of educating people on that. It's just so interesting. And I think it can really, especially when you use, I'm a visual learner, so like graphs and stuff, like I will sometimes send my clients resources and they can see these things and be like, wow, that's where I'm operating from. And then I can instruct them with like we can use this breath and these poses to bring you back down into your parasympathetic nervous system. So that stuff is really cool to me. I've been kind of nerding out on that lately, and just diving more deeper into somatic practices and other nervous system techniques. So learning that. I'm also very interested in different forms of therapy and retreats. So right now I'm looking at leading an equine therapy retreat where they focus on equine therapy and yoga. So they kind of pair those together, and it's like a trauma informed retreat. So I think stuff like that is really cool to just pull in all those different things to try to help people heal. And also lately, inner child healing. I've been incorporating that into my practices and my teaching because I think it's really important with childhood trauma to work on that. So,
Hmm. You know, my therapist actually sent me a video on polyvagal theory, and I'd be happy to share it with you after this call. And so it's a pretty simplistic sort of way to help break down polyvagal theory, because polyvagal theory is so complex and
yeah,
nobody understands it. I couldn't even understand it, but this video explains it clearly, broken down step by step, the processes involved. So yeah.
I love that. I would love that. Yeah, when I read about it at first, it was kind of hard to wrap my mind around, and it wasn't until I took this trauma training and she brought in all these cool graphs and papers, and I was like, oh, it clicked, and I was like, yay.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm. What was your experience like, like getting to where you are today, like education wise, like, I don't know if you've had to take classes or like, what was your experience getting to where you are today? Like,
well, I did my 200-hour teacher training. That took about 12 weeks, I believe. And then I did 300 hours. So that was over the course of 8 months. And I have done several continuing education trainings since then. The 20-hour trauma training. I'm currently enrolled in a 50-hour mindful eating training to also help women with eating disorders. And yeah, just picking up all kinds of resources from different online trainings I've taken from people like, Gabor Mate and all these people who are kind of leading in the trauma field. I'm just kind of pulling in those different um, pieces of education. So, yeah.
hmm. So which leads me to my next question, what tips of advice would you give to those who want to do what you're doing, like in yoga and trauma informed approaches, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, if you're already a teacher, I would say, if you're already a yoga teacher, I would say just thinking about, well, let me back up just one second, because when you first get done being a yoga teacher, all you can really do is focus on teaching a class and getting through the class because you're micromanaging so many different things, cueing and just like watching the room, doing different things. Sometimes you're adjusting technical things. And I think that is all really you can focus on is just getting through the class. But once you get a little further along, really inviting that inquisitiveness in and that inquiry in of, and how can I teach a room full of people where someone might be a beginner, someone might be more advanced, someone might be going through trauma. Someone might be, everybody's has different things going on. So how can I make it overall more a trauma informed experience? So yeah, if you're a new teacher, I would say just try to focus on being a teacher for a little bit and then, really start to invite more of that inclusive, invitational language in, which can just mean saying things more by choice. If you would like to do this when you're ready versus that really directive, authoritative language when you're teaching. Yeah.
Hmm. And lastly, how can yoga and sort of the trauma-informed approach of mental health, how can that sort of really help create positive outcomes for people? Because on one hand you have yoga and the other hand you have trauma-informed approaches, but how can those two kind of form together to really help the person out, with whatever struggle that they may have? I know it's kind of big picture, but could you maybe tackle that?
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely try. I Well, yoga, a lot of times you're dealing with bringing awareness to the body sensation, you're noticing feelings. So over time, and none of these things happen overnight. It's over time you kind of start to notice little shifts like, oh, you're more aware. And that's with the physical practice. Yoga has 8 limbs, so there's so much more to it than just moving through poses. There's a lot of mindfulness and awareness, with your mental health. And I think that when you kind of dive deeper into more than just the physical aspect of yoga, you really get all of that combined. I will say that as far as healing goes, yoga has been such a great modality and such a great just overall for my mental and physical health. But I have paired it with other things like trauma therapy and these other um, body-based therapies. So I think it definitely pairs well with that. But it's not necessarily a fix-all. But it does. I think the biggest thing for me is the awareness it's given me physically, just being able to be in my body more, and then mentally, because at first meditation was really hard for me. But as time went on, I've gotten more like prone to meditating, and for me it's more in small doses. I don't try to sit down and meditate for like 20 minutes. I'll just try to do like 2 to 3 minutes of just mindfulness or just kind of a guided visualization and breathing, and that seems to work for me. So you can really pull so many aspects for it or from it for your physical body and your mental health. And it's just such a beautiful thing to incorporate, and along with all the other modalities that you can use. And over time, I've gained just kind of, I call it my yoga toolbox, where all the things I've collected from my own teacher trainings, and then all of the things I've learned in my own healing. And I just try to put them all in that toolbox. And then I try to pull from that when I'm working with people. And I think that that could work for everybody, you know, all the
Mhm.
things that you kind of gain along the way, you could be using your, so.
All righty. Okie dokie.